So as an anthropologist, I mean, I'm so glad you said I'm an anthropologist because some people think I'm just like a digital geek guy, but my real life is as an anthropologist, and I'm really into like old mythologies and things. And the Aztecs actually have a really interesting story, and it starts off with the world on fire, and all the animals are running away, all hope is lost, and this type of thing. And it seems like such an apt metaphor for our times. We have all kinds of crises: environmental crisis, energy crisis, economic crisis. And if you want to just a quick sort of visual of how the world looks right now, just visualize right now that there are actually people in the world in Haiti, Indonesia, India, Thailand, actually living off of heaps of trash. And in the meantime, there are islands of trash growing in the Pacific. I mean, the world is on fire. And if you think about this particular moment, one would think that we should have some urgency trying to get our young people together to really do something about this. And the way we do this, of course, is we put them in large boxes that look like this, and of course they disengage. And this is really frustrating to me when I first started teaching about 7 years ago. A lot of my colleagues said, well, it's just this generation, they're just disengaged group. But of course, when you compare this generation here, you know, and those of you who saw this, I'm actually giving a 3-minute version of my talk from 2 years ago to catch you up with where we're at. So obviously something else is going on. And the reason why they're so engaged here but not here is because they're meaning seekers. Like all of us, we live in a world in which we have almost infinite possibilities for finding who we are and who we want to be and all those types of things. So here they are trying to find their meaning. And they live in this world of whatever, right? Like they have like whatever they want to be, whatever they want to see, they can always see it. And as Thomas de Zengotita points out, in the midst of a fabulous array of historically unprecedented and utterly mind-boggling stimuli, whatever. And so here we are in this classroom, but of course this classroom has changed quite dramatically just in the past few years. In about 7 years ago, in this case, there was literally something put into the air, and that something that was put into the air was the digital artifacts of about 2 billion people on the planet connecting and collaborating. If you could picture it, it would look something like this, and I would consider this to be that historically unprecedented and utterly mind-boggling knowledge creation collaboration machine, but it enters the classroom as a distraction machine. And so that becomes very interesting, right? So what I talked about 2 years ago was sort of trying to give this history of modernity and how we ended up where we are today. And it basically starts off, you know, we got our cities are growing. We move from corner markets to larger supermarkets. We find most of our information and connection through television. And then we get bigger cities, bigger supermarkets, and ultimately more television. And by 2000, Robert Putnam was pointing out that our communities had collapsed. Our social capital had collapsed. So community was in decline. But at this very moment, there's this cultural inversion that happens. While we're expressing individualism, we actually start to value community. We start to seek something that's been lost. We express independence, but value relationships. We express superficiality and find ourselves striving for authenticity and valuing authenticity. And my core example from 2 years ago was this. Like at the beginning of YouTube and sort of the birth of the web, you had these remarkable collaborations of young people coming together. Here, this one staged by Mad V, who simply asked young people to make a statement, or just anybody to make a statement, holding their hand up to the camera. And you think about these webcams sitting all over the world, like 1 billion networked webcams, and what would people hold up to that camera? And of course, very moving messages of connection, loving yourself, loving each other. And what I ended with last time was this idea that maybe we could move past the superficiality version of whatever, past the disengaged version of whatever, and onto a world of whatever it takes by whatever means necessary. And so Mika called me a few months ago, and he wanted to know, how are we doing? So that's what this talk is about. Like 2 years later, how are we doing? And I wanted to set up, there's sort of a narrative that might seem to be at the back of this, and I want to clear this up just a little bit. So Jeremy Rifkin has this book out called The Empathic Civilization, and there's this narrative behind it that might sound similar to what I'm saying, but I'm actually trying to distinguish a bit from it. What Rifkin says is that in tribal societies, you have basically empathy is there, but it can only be shared with people at a shouting distance. So you have communication only goes face to face and at a shouting distance, and that's the sort of horizon of empathy. And then you move to writing cultures, and that empathy can expand to anybody who can read the words. And then you go on to the printing press, and it expands further. And then you get to the global communication, and you end up with global consciousness and global empathy. But I have quite a bit of experience with this type of stuff, being an anthropologist. So I want to take you into New Guinea to give you a sense of what tribal life really looks like. And so I'm just going to do a little virtual tour for you guys. I spent, this is where I did my dissertation fieldwork. So you fly into this airstrip here. It takes you about 2 weeks to 2 months to get there. And then you walk for a couple days, and you end up in places like this. And the reason why it takes you 2 weeks to 2 months is because you're like hitching rides on Cessnas and that kind of thing. And you end up in these little villages like this, which have no internet access, no electricity, no running water. I'm basically completely off the grid. And if you walk around a bit, you'll see they raise all their own food, taro, sweet potato, bananas. They raise pigs. They also hunt for other food. So snakes is actually a really good deal because the best time to catch a snake is just after it's eaten. So you not only get the snake, but you get to cut open the middle of the snake, and you get the appetizer. And this snake was actually really important to my sort of this breakthrough moment for me. I was staying in this house here. See if I can go inside. Yeah, there's inside the hut. Those are actually my legs up in the corner. And we ate this snake. About a week after I first arrived, we ate this snake. And the snake was found about 100 feet from where I was staying. And so we eat the snake, and I'm looking around and noticing that there's holes everywhere in the hut. And I'm thinking my snake karma is not good. So I'm especially worried this night that I'm going to let the snake could come in here. And so I'm like wrapping myself up in my sleeping bag super tight, but it's the tropics, so inevitably it comes off of me in the middle of the night. And that very night, I wake up in the middle of the night, and there's this thing across my chest about this big around. And I managed to grab it with my left hand and throw it off of me, but as I throw it, I roll with it. So now I'm down on the ground with this thing. And I have it pinned down with my left hand, and I try to move my right arm so I can pin it down with two hands, but I can't move my right arm. And it's about this time I realize I've actually pinned down my own right arm like this. What had happened was my arm had fallen asleep and was across me like this. So there was no snake. And all this, like, this sounds really funny. I could actually tell you funny story after funny story about all this kind of stuff. The main purpose of this is to set up that I am just a total foreigner there. Like, I'm so different. I don't speak their language. I have no connection to them whatsoever. I can't make any connection to them. And so, of course, I'm like lost and devastated and all those types of things. And so I'm just a couple days after that event, I'm walking around. These two guys are sort of escorting me around. We can just barely speak each other's language. Like I'm sort of like catching on to some sort of pidgin English stuff that they know as well. And so we're walking along this ridge, and it's just about as beautiful as you can imagine. And I've always been like this incredibly optimistic and really happy guy, but all of a sudden I'm just starting to collapse inside. And we're just walking along this ridge, and this sadness just overtakes me. And I start to just barely be able to walk, and pretty soon I'm just collapsing on the side of this ridge. And I actually end up basically in a fetal position crying. And by the time these two guys who are behind me, and this is just a matter of seconds, by the time they're next to me, they're crying too. And here we like barely speak any language, shared language at all, and they're already crying. And it struck me like, wow, that's empathy, right? And then there's this moment soon after that. They said they asked me like in sort of broken language on both sides. They're saying, "Why are you crying?" And the only thing I could think of was that I said I miss my wife. And then they just started laughing and laughing and laughing. And they said, "Oh, we would never miss our wives," you know. So there's like all kinds of. I mean, it gets really complicated when you go across cultures, right? I mean, empathy and love sort of run in different ways. But there's one thing for sure. They certainly had empathy for me. It was really quite powerful and profound to me, and I've never forgotten that. And then you think back to what's happening online. You think about, okay, how deep does empathy go here? And you know, I showed this a couple years ago. This is a great example, right? This is the YouTube comments, and I don't even really need to pick out anything particular. You guys have all seen this type of stuff, and that's unfair, right? To cherry pick from the web and say, okay, that declares that empathy is on the decline. But there's actually a study from Michigan recently that has shown that it seems like empathy is on the decline among young people, especially in the last 10 years. So there's a problem. And going back to New Guinea and think about the roots of empathy. Where does empathy come from? Empathy comes from a sense of shared vulnerability, a sense of shared suffering, that we are in something together and that we both have a sense of like common destiny. And in New Guinea, you always have that sense. Sickness and death are not hidden away. They're always right there, all around you, all the time. And then you compare that and what you see in New Guinea to our modern civilization. You think about modernity itself, and it's all about capsules and encapsulating people in houses, into the supermarket, screened by media, and then more capsules, bigger markets, bigger media. And we end up sort of screened, right? Screened and always behind something, always in our capsules, always mediated. There's actually this great book out called The Capsular Civilization, which is kind of a neat sort of counter to the empathic civilization of Rifkin. And there's something really important about that we've sort of lost our capacity to be vulnerable and to embrace and sort of get beyond our fears. Brene Brown has written about this recently. She points out the ways that we hide from our vulnerabilities. She says, we are the most addicted, medicated, obese, in debt, and busy adult cohort in human history. She points out we are numbing ourselves, and you cannot numb emotions selectively. That is to say that, the more we numb ourselves to pain and sort of disconnection, we ultimately are also numbing ourselves to the possibilities of joy and connection. But I think there's something here, because the more we sort of become encapsulated, there's that other side, that inversion side. That is, the more we become encapsulated, the more we long for connection and empathy and that true authentic relationship. And I think when it really happens, the best possibilities are exhibited best in music. And so I wanted to bring up Eric Whitaker's thing here. I've sort of created a little mashup here to demonstrate something. So the reason why I bring up music here is thinking about the singer's voice and the courage it takes to build on that voice. But once you bring out that voice, then it starts to layer upon the contributions of other people. And so Eric here, conducting his virtual choir, is a great example of all these voices coming together, building on one another. And our web applications are the same way. They build on top of one another. Of course, it's really powerful what one voice can do. And I think it's also important to think about just how close so many people are to breaking through. And I think crisis moments are especially important. A lot of people have already pointed this out, because that's where our shared vulnerabilities come out. So in the Kenyan elections of 2007, we saw Ushahidi emerge as Kenyans, a handful of Kenyans put together Ushahidi Kenya, which allows people to report on their cell phones to other people who receive updates on their cell phones, all mapped and getting people the information they need where they need it. And of course that creates 45,000 citizen reporters. And of course they give it up for free. They give away this platform for free so other people can build on it. I've already talked to several people who are building on it in this room. And here you see Tufts University students in the wake of the Haiti earthquake actually using the platform to receive messages. And again, the way the voices pile on top of one another. So here we have the messages coming in, like let's say we are looking for Gebi Joseph who got married under Royal University. Those are being translated by people almost instantly. All of this is done not just on Google Maps but on OpenStreetMaps, another collaboration of thousands of people. Those are the maps that are on the ground. And now this would seem to be like sort of a big global thing, but it happens in local levels as well. This is my hometown of Manhattan, Kansas. We're using Ushahidi just for a simple project of mapping bike routes, and 180 students getting involved in the process using OpenStreetMap to create a bikeability map of our small town. All of this creating a more bike-friendly community. And all that sounds like, that's where you get down into the mundane. It seems like such a small thing to do, but I was just sitting in City Hall in this little Manhattan, Kansas, the other Manhattan, just a few days ago. And this is a fight that we should never win in Manhattan, Kansas. But because we had so much passion, because we had the data coming behind it, built through platforms like OpenStreetMap and Ushahidi and so on, we ultimately did win the day that day. City Commission went for our plan. And it's just one small step away from this encapsulation. And these little things really do matter. So returning now to that Aztec story, so in the Aztec story, the world's on fire and all the animals are running away. They've all given up. And this little bird is, this eagle looks back and can see this little bird running up to this little stream, filling its beak with water, and then flying up over the fire and dousing it with this little drop of water. And the eagle comes back and says, "This is crazy. What are you doing?" And this little bird says, "The best I can." And the eagle is immediately inspired by this and starts swooping down himself into the water and flying up over the fire. And then all the other animals start to see this, and they start rushing back. And pretty soon, all the animals are doing their own thing, right? And that some of the animals are digging the trenches, and all the birds fill the sky so thick so that it's like rain coming down from the clouds. And this is why we can still talk about that little bird that saved the world. Thanks.